Ramunachira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, or Premanandi. So, reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam. You're in a really interesting section of the Bhagavatam, a little difficult to understand the topics. It's the chapter 5 in the second canto, and the chapter is entitled The Cause of All Causes. So we are going to cover, theoretically, we're going to cover chapter 5, text 21 through 35, I think is my quota. Okay, which is a lot of verses. Even the very first verse, which we're going to stress, is like a Haribol verse. Okay, so just to warn you. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And can we chant this one together? Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam dhiraya nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloker bhaktir bhavati naistaki. Or reciting the Srimad. Oh, that way we start? Yeah, okay. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, Goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and Srila Prabhupada, the translator and commentator. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome and loving service praise with transcendental song is established as an irrevocable fact. So, since you're just starting this semester, just to tune in to this chapter, the inquiry was they wanted to know about the process of creation. So it's all being explained. Narada approaches Brahma and he's inquisitive. If you're so powerful, how come you're worshiping somebody else? Who is the source? Is there another source other than you? That was the question in the beginning of the chapter. And so now Brahma is explaining his position. He's explaining the difference between Sarga and Visarga. Sarga is the initial creation by the Lord. The Lord creates everything, all the ingredients, the soup, so you could say, the soup, Sarga. And from the ingredients in that ingredients, Lord Brahma creates the manifested worlds, different positions and everything. Visarga, he's the secondary creator. So that's what he's explaining in these coming verses and the previous verses too. Okay, so text 21. So what we'll do is read the English verses and then we'll go back to text 21. So I'll read the first one and then you can go around the room with the others up to 35. So this is Lord Brahma speaking to Narada. The Lord, who is the controller of all energies, thus creates by his own potency eternal time, the fate of all living entities, and their particular nature for which they were created. And he again merges them independently. Next one.
After the incarnation of the first Purusha, Karnadaksha Vishnu, the Mahatattva, the principle of material creation, principles of material creation take place. And then, I can't read this with glasses anymore, and then time is manifested. I can't.
And in course of time, the three qualities appear. Nature means the three qualitative appearances. They transform into activities.
Material activities are caused by the Mahatattvas being arranged, being agitated. At first, there is transformation of the modes of goodness and passion, and later, due to the mode of ignorance, matter, its knowledge, and different activities of material knowledge come into play.
The self-centered materialistic ego, thus being transformed into three features, becomes known as the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance in three divisions, namely the powers that evolve matter, knowledge of material creations, and the intelligence that guides such materialistic activities. Now that you are quite competent to understand this. Narda might be quite competent to understand it, but for us it's very difficult to understand. Continue, please.
From the darkness of the false ego, the first of the five senses, namely the sky, is generated.
Elements. First of the five elements.
Okay. From the darkness of false ego, the first of the five elements, namely the sky, is generated. Its subtle form is the quality of sound, exactly as the seer is in relationship with the seen.
As the sky is transformed, the air is generated with the quality of touch, and by previous succession, the air is also full of sound and the basic principles of duration of life, sense perception, mental power, and bodily strength. When the air is transformed in course of time and nature's course, fire is generated, taking shape with the sense of touch and sound. Since fire is also transformed, there is a manifestation of water, full of juice and taste. As previously, it also has form and touch and is also full of sound. And water, being transformed from all variegatedness on earth, appears in others and, as previously, becomes qualitatively full of juice, touch, sound, and form respectively.
From the mood of the goodness, the mind is generated and becomes manifest, and as also the 10 demigods controlling the body movements. Such demigods are known as the controller of the directions and the controller of the air, the sun god, the father of the Daksha, Prajapati, the Ashwini Kumars, the fire god, the king of heaven, the worshipable deity in the heaven, and the chief of the Adityas and Brahmaji, the Prajapati, all come into the existence.
By further transformation of the mode of passion, the sense organs like the ear, skin, nose, eyes, tongue, mouth, hands, genitals, legs, and the outlet for evacuating, together with intelligence and living energy, are all generated.
O Narada, best of the transcendentalists, the forms of the body cannot take place as long as these created parts, namely the elements, senses, mind, and modes of nature, are not assembled.
Read that again, okay? Just so that, because it's hard to concentrate on these, but here's the flow right here, summation.
O Narada, best of the transcendentalists.
Can we turn the feedback? Can you turn the volume down, or it's not possible? Okay, all right.
Hare Krishna. Maybe I just have to be a bit farther away from it.
It's a good try. Go ahead.
O Narada, best of the transcendentalists, the forms of the body cannot take place as long as these created parts, namely the elements, senses, mind, and modes of nature, are not assembled.
Continue.
Thus, when all these became assembled by the force of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
This universe certainly came into being by accepting both the primary and secondary causes of creation.
So what's the primary cause of creation? Okay, and who's in charge of Sarga? Krishna, okay. And the secondary? Visharga. And that's Brahma, yeah. Okay, two more, 34 and 35.
Thus, all the universes remain thousands of eons within the water, the causal ocean, and the Lord of living beings entering in each of them caused them to be fully animated.
Thousands of eons. It's a gradual process. Go ahead.
The Lord, Mahavishnu, although lying in the causal ocean, came out of it, dividing himself as Hiranyagarbha. He entered into each universe and assumed the Virat Rupa, with thousands of legs, arms, mouths, heads, etc.
Okay, now you got it. Got it? Some part of the process of creation is explained there. And what's your general impression? Anyone? Some general impressions? Technical. Anything else? Any other words you'd like to explain that in? Extensive. Yeah. Prabhu. Dumbfounded. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Thorough. Exactly. Interesting, isn't it? It's so like we've been brought up with the concept that God is great, right? But to get this kind of information, it's like an explosion in your mind. It's like, oh, making it bigger. And that's what Brahman means that your intelligence is expanded. Kripana means your intelligence is contracted, so you only see a certain amount. Yeah, I can see really clearly, but you can only see a certain amount of things. But through the Vedic literature, our consciousness can gradually become expanded, actually unlimitedly, to understand these concepts. Okay, so we're going to concentrate on text 21. Omagyanati mirandasya jananjana salakaya chaksu ulitam jena tasmai shigurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master very kindly forced my eyes open with the torchlight of knowledge, like some of the knowledge that's here. Just some of it. This is just a few verses of the knowledge that expand your eyes and your mind and your heart. So I'm totally indebted to Srila Prabhupada for that opportunity, for that mercy that he bestowed on me and millions of others. And I beg for service from him, life after life, eternally. Okay, so text 21. Okay, good. Kalam karma svabhavam cha. Kalam karma svabhavam cha. Mayesho mayaya svaya. Mayesho mayaya svaya. Atmam yadrichaya praptam. Atmam yadrichaya praptam. Vibhudhur upadade. Vibhudhur upadade. Vibhudhur upadade. Kalam karma svabhavam cha. Mayesho mayaya svaya. Atmam yadrichaya praptam. Vibhudhur upadade. Kalam karma svabhavam cha. Amam yadrichaya praptam. Vibhubhushur upadade. Kalam karma svabhavam cha. Mayesho Maya Yasvaya Atman Kalam Karma Swabhavam Cha Mayesho Maya Yasvaya Yatman Rajitstaya Praptam Vibhuvushur Padate. One more on the ladies' side. Kalam Karma Swabhavam Cha Mayesho Vibhuvushur Padate. Kalam, eternal time. Karma, the fate of the living entity. Swabhavam, nature. Cha, also. Maya, potency. Isha, the controller. Mayaya, by the energy. Svaya, of his own. Atman, Atmani, unto his self. Yadrichaya, independently. Praptam, being merged in. Vibhushu, appearing differently. Upadade, accepted for being created again. So this first line, Kalam Karma Svabhavam Cha, these principles, eternal time, the fate of the living entities, and Svabhavam, these are big concepts. A lot of these words. Yadrichaya is another term. Here it's translated as independently. In other places it's translated as by chance. But then nothing ever really happens by chance. It happens because of karma, because of some past activities, or there's a cause behind it. So here, anyway, there's a different aspect of it. Anyway, here's the translation. The Lord, who is the controller of all energies. Again now, just again to focus in, because it's hard to concentrate when it's all so technical. What the main point that Lord Brahma is trying to express to Narada is the difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entities. Although we have similar qualities of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, the Supreme Lord is unlimitedly knowledgeable, and unlimitedly blissful, and unlimitedly potent in everything. And we have just a little spark of that. But in illusion, under the potency of false ego and this and that, bodily concept, we're thinking that we're as good as God. And it's such a great illusion that just the fact that something, someone, some entity so insignificant and with such limited potency can think that they're the Supreme Lord, that potency of illusion is so powerful. That's one of the points that he's making. One of them, one of the many points. Okay. The Lord, who is the controller of all energies, thus creates by his own potency eternal time, the fate of all living entities, and that has to be explained, okay, and their particular nature for which they were created, and he again merges them independently. In other words, the creation and destruction of the material world is eternal in the sense that it's going on continually. Sometimes the material world is manifest and we have our different concepts of bodily concepts of life. It's manifested. And at a certain point, it's annihilated again. But it's not over, because then again, creation takes place after eons and eons of years. But it's happening over and over again. In other words, nothing's new in this material world. And we've tried in all different species of life, trying to squeeze out some pleasure, thinking, yeah, I'm going to make it in this life. Okay, sorry. This purport is just as complicated as the previous verses, so bear with me. But before even talking about the purport, why is creation so important to understand? That if we can get that little concept, I think it will help you, because this 5th chapter, 2nd canto, 5th and 6th chapter of the second canto explain the process of creation. Third canto, fifth and sixth chapter, also explain it again, the process of creation, this time with a little different aspect, from a little different angle, but the same process is there. The creation is described many, many, many times in the Bhagavatam. And you would think, well, hey, I just want to know about Krishna and his pastimes. They're so attractive, and I can comprehend, little boy, and he did this. I can get that, as opposed to, Yad Rich Chaya Kala Swama Karma. You know what I mean? It's hard to get that concept, but it's so important because Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his comments, he says, "Oh no, why are you talking about the creation again and again and again?" And he says he's talking about it because that concept to understand is really, really important. Because if we hear from different scriptures that the two most important rules in Krishna consciousness are to always remember Krishna and never forget him. How do you do that? If we need to, and so we do it by getting these basic appreciations between the difference of the Lord and the living entity. Get this basic understanding of how this creation is so complete, formidable, thorough, complicated, etc. And then we get, and you get it gradually. I'm nothing like that. I don't have any of that potency. I have a little spark of that potency, but I'm not. There's a difference between me. Then we get that we're so. Yes, Prabhu.
I've heard it put this way, that the creation is also his Leela. And if you don't understand, or at least have an appreciation for his Leela as the creator, then you'll never be able to understand the grandeur of his personal pastimes.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. It's actually, and it's so true, because why one of the reasons why Krishna's activities in the 10th canto are so relishable is they're easily relatable, as his form as a person and this and that. But the misconception, the danger is to think that he's on the same level. He's just an ordinary. And unless we get this basic concept down, the difference between the Lord and the living entity, then we hear of his pastimes, stealing butter or acting with the gopis and this and that, and we bring it down to our level and then miss the whole point. Okay, just wanted to put that in there. Okay, so here's we're starting with this purport. And okay, so the first sentence: the creation of the material world, wherein the conditioned souls are allowed to act subordinately by the Supreme Lord, takes place again and again after being repeatedly annihilated. The material creation is something like a cloud in the unlimited sky. The real sky is the spiritual sky, eternally filled with the rays of the Brahmajyoti. And a portion of this unlimited sky is covered by the Mahatattva cloud of material creation. So in other words, we're actually in the spiritual world. This is the spiritual world. This energy of the Lord, this material energy of the Lord is his energy. It's material, it's manifested temporarily, etc., but it's an eternal energy. And it's part of the Lord's whole creation. Although we feel very separate from the Lord and very, very huge, there's a huge distance between us and quote unquote going back home, back to Godhead. It's actually what Prabhupada says is when one becomes more and more higher levels of realization, we'll realize that we're right there in the spiritual world. It's just a question of changing our consciousness from the material consciousness of I, me, and mine. Easily said and done, right? Just change your consciousness, Prabhu, from I, me, and mine to Krishna consciousness. I just want to serve Krishna. He's right there. This is all his energy. And we see how that get tripped up in that all the time. Okay, so what was the concept? What was this sentence that we just read, the last couple of sentences, how it explains the material world? What was the concept of what it was like, where it is? Amrita, get your little microphone there.
World is like a cloud in the spiritual sky.
Yeah, it's just it's just a little cloud in the corner. It's just a small, and although we think it's really crowded here, this is just the like the prison house or the where the bad people are, the one who turned away from Krishna. Most everybody's perfectly happy in the spiritual world in their real position, and it's just a few of us here, trying to make it or break it on our own. Okay, the sky. The real sky is the spiritual sky, eternally filled with the rays of the Brahmajyoti, and a portion of this unlimited sky is covered by the Mahatattva cloud of material creation, in which the conditioned souls who want to lord it against the will of the Lord are put into play as they desire under the control of the Lord by the agency of his external energy. Just like you could say a child sometimes, the little toddlers, they're put into playpens, pens, not pins, pens, play pens, so that they have a safe environment that they can, 2 feet by 2 feet. They have a safe environment. They're not going to tip over or do this or that too much anyway. And they play. But it's just because they can't, when they get out, then they're always sticking their fingers in the electric plug or this or that or whatever, because they're rascally. So that's where we are. We're in the playpen. As the rainy season appears and disappears regularly, the creation takes place and is again annihilated under the control of the Lord, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. That's an interesting concept too, because we're thinking that this is the all in all, that this, and some people think that this one life is the all in all. But actually, this whole process of creation, growth, dwindling, and destruction takes place again and again. There's nothing new here. So the creation and annihilation of the material worlds is a regular action of the Lord, just to allow the conditioned souls to play as they like, and thereby create their own fate of being differently created again in terms of their independent desires at the time of annihilation. Can somebody translate that and say that in their own words? Yes, Prabhu.
Whatever you're thinking about at the time of death, that's the body that you're going to take next life.
Okay. All right. So it happens again and again, and Krishna allows out. It's the material world is, and you can say, created for the living entities to enjoy in. But in one sense, it's not created for the living entities to enjoy it, because you can't enjoy here separate from Krishna. And you see that all of our endeavors end up in frustration sooner or later. But still, Krishna allows it because he never forces anybody to love him. He is so kind. So sometimes people argue, right? If God is so kind and God is so wonderful, then how come there's so much suffering? So what's the answer to that? How come there's so much suffering and misery in the world?
It's not God that creates the suffering, it's ourselves.
Yeah, by our actions. And that, if you remember, if I switch this, can you go up to the verse and then come down again? Because if I do it, I'll get lost. Sorry. So, the Lord, who is the controller of all energies, thus creates by his own potency eternal time the fate. He creates the fate of all living entities. Now that sounds a little like there's no free will, doesn't it? He creates our fate. But actually the understanding there is he's creating that the action and reaction. If one acts according to the will of the Lord, there's no karma involved. If one acts according to their particular material desire and acts in this way, then there's equal action and reaction for those activities. So he creates the reaction, and therefore we do the activities. The reaction is already in place by the Lord's arrangement. So we're creating our own karma, because eating meat has a certain reaction, doing this has a certain reaction, doing that, robbing a bank has a reaction, whatever, killing bugs has a reaction. And so we're creating our own activities because the reaction is created by the Lord. Is that clear? Was anyone like to say it in other words, in a different way, a more clear way, or any questions on that point? I bet you do. Go ahead, say something.
I always had kind of a problem with that point. Feeling like abandoned, like a child would be abandoned by a parent.
Mm.
Or it's all your fault.
Mm.
So what good parent would leave the child suffer or unattended for? Yeah, we have Krishna intervene. He senses devotees, senses scripture. He comes himself. But it seems like there's a sense of abandonment, and it's a part of this part of creation.
Okay, thanks for expressing that. If you consider what's being said here, how this material world is being created and annihilated again and again. Now, from our perspective, being stuck in it, from our perspective, this is taking a really long time to go through all 8,004,000 species of life, 400,000 species of life. And then we did it and we got to the human form of life. Then we got karma, then we got down and then and up. And then there was Mahavishnu breathed out and we were born and then he breathed in. And we're thinking that this is like taking a long time, but it's all within a breath. So we feel like we've been abandoned just like a child when he's in the crowded mall with his mother and he goes away a little bit and his mother's told him a million times, don't leave me, blah, 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 whatever. And so she might hide behind a column or something. And he doesn't see his mother for 2.5 minutes and he freaks out. But it's not a very long time and she's watching over him. So similarly, to get a better understanding of that we're not abandoned, we need to stretch out our understanding or expand our understanding of how this time, the time factor affects people in different ways. For the ant, he's born, whatever, in a few days, and for him to cross from this side of the room to the end of the room, that's a huge endeavor. That's like going to China for it, whatever. But he does it. But he's got a different, and we're thinking, oh, it's just an ant and insignificant and this and that and go on. But for him, it's a long time. For the little bugs that are born in the night and then they, get attracted to the light bulb and then they touch the fire or whatever and they die. Their whole 100 years, their whole concept of life, that 100 years takes place in that very short time. Similarly, human life, we have 100 years and we think sometimes if we're lucky, we have 100 or unlucky maybe. We think it's a really long time. It's really hardly any time. It's just our concept. So understanding how the creation is manifest and then annihilated over and over and over and over again. That the Lord, through all of this description, he's in charge of all of these different things, the air, the wind, this, that, so many things. There's nothing that exists outside of him. It's just a question of turning our vision to see that. Might help a little bit. Do you have something you want to say, or?
If I'm the one who's abandoning Krishna, and so if anyone has the right to feel abandoned, it's Krishna. I'm the one who's doing it.
That reminded me of something too that I was thinking of. Sometimes when you have a certain relationship and somebody's a little mean to you or this or that, and you think, I'm not going to talk to them anymore because it's always a little problematic or sticky or this stuff. How many times did we, insult Krishna directly or indirectly, or turn away from him, or totally disregard? Even in our attempt to turn towards him, we're sometimes totally disregarding. I don't feel like offering patience is right. You do it, or whatever, ad infinitum, and still he's there within the heart, not abandoning us. And that's real love. That's real love. He doesn't give up on us. Okay. Yes.
was just going to speak on this same theme and say that if we didn't have the suffering and Krishna were to shield us from all suffering, we would never want to leave here.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
if we were in the spiritual world, that's one thing. I mean, if we were conscious of being in the spiritual world, that would be one thing. But because we've turned our hearts away from him, if we had no suffering in order to train us, it's the idea of the Bible when it says, train up your child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he won't depart from it. So the Lord is training us to how to love him again.
Yeah. And not in the mean way either, which is what you're insinuating too. It's training because actually there is no happiness apart from the Lord, service of the Lord. That's where the happiness lies. And yeah. Okay, we'll go on because there's still a lot more here. The creation, therefore, takes place at a historical date, as we are accustomed to think of everything which has a beginning in our tiny experience. So I'm going to read that again. The creation, therefore, takes place at a historical date, as we are accustomed to think of everything which has a beginning in our tiny experience. The process of creation and annihilation is called anadi, or without reference to date regarding the time of creation. Without reference to date regarding the time creation first took place, because the duration of even a partial creation is 8,640,000,000 years. Is that the right numbers? Did I put enough zeros? Say that again. How do you like that? And he lives for 100 years. Yeah. So in other words, the creation is continually coming into existence. The world is continually coming into existence and being annihilated. But and Srila Prabhupada often would say it's impossible to trace out when we first became conditioned, when we first left. It's impossible to trace out. That's why the living entities in this material world are called nitya baddha, eternally conditioned, as opposed to nitya mukta, eternally liberated. The law of creation is, however, as mentioned in the Vedic literatures, that it is created at certain intervals and is again annihilated by the will of the Lord. The whole material or even the spiritual creation is a manifestation of the energy of the Lord, just as, now here's this is what's so nice about these Vedic examples, because the concept of creation and annihilation is difficult enough as it is. But here we get a little example that we can see, we can relate to and get the concept that's going on. So I'm going to just start. The whole material or even the spiritual creation is a manifestation of the energy of the Lord, just as light and heat of a fire are different manifestations of the fire's energy. In other words, fire always emanates some light. And what else? Heat. Big fire, big light, big heat, little fire, little light, little heat. But it's always there, those two things. If there's a fire that doesn't have any light, it ain't a fire. It's smoldering or something, but it's not a fire. If there's sugar that's not sweet, then it's not sugar. It's something else. It's some other substance. So this creation is an energy of the Lord, and it manifests different qualities. That's the nature of energy. It has of the Lord's energy. It has different qualities. So the Lord, continuing, the Lord therefore exists in his impersonal form, and this is what confuses people. The Lord therefore exists in his impersonal form by such expansion of energy, and the complete creation rests on his impersonal feature. So the impersonal feature is an energy of the Lord, just as the heat and the light are part of the fire. But the heat and the light aren't fire in and of itself. Fire is the fire. The heat and light are just characteristics. So the Lord's impersonal feature isn't the major characteristic of the Lord, his personal feature, but he has that energy that can manipulate, maneuver, whatever, the material world in so many ways that even though there's nothing in existence but the Supreme Lord, the conditioned living entity sees everything separate from the Lord, sees everything but the Lord. The air, the wind, the moon, the this, the that, they're all the Lord's manifestation energy, and we're just seeing air and wind and whatever, and not in relation to the Lord. And therefore, people are, it's hard to go beyond that. That's why Srila Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita that somebody who's speculating onto trying to find out what the nature of the absolute truth is can, at best, only come to the level of impersonal understanding, at best, on their own. So therefore, we have to hear from a proper source to hear about his personal feature and how that the impersonal feature is a manifestation of his energy. So we don't stop our spiritual progress on that level of impersonal realization, which is progress. It's still progress, but it's incomplete. And it's particularly missing that Ananda Buddhi Vardhanam, the unlimited happiness of devotional service. Nonetheless, he keeps himself distinct from such creation as the Purnam, or complete. And so no one should wrongly think that his personal feature is not existent due to his impersonal, unlimited expansions. The impersonal expansion is a manifestation of his energy, and he is always in his personal feature, despite his innumerable, unlimited expansions of impersonal energies. And that's confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9, chapter 5, verse 5 through 7. For human intelligence, it's very difficult to conceive how the whole creation rests on his expansion of energy. So we're not alone in thinking this is very complicated and hard to understand. But the Lord has given a very good example in the Bhagavad Gita. It is said that although the air and atoms rest within the huge expansion of the sky, which is like the resting reservoir of everything materially created. So there's the sky, and all the air and the atoms are somehow or other floating around inside the sky. Still, the sky remains separate and unaffected by whatever's happening inside the sky. Similarly, although the Supreme Lord maintains everything created by his expansion of energy, he always remains separate. Lord Chaitanya explains this philosophy in a certain term. Remember that term that Lord Chaitanya uses? Yes, Achinta Beda Abeda Tattva, that simultaneously it's one, but he's different at the same time. It really explains a lot, doesn't it? Okay, this is accepted even by Sankaracharya, the great advocate of the impersonal form of the Absolute. He says Narayana Paro Vyaktat, or Narayan exists separately, apart from the impersonal creative energy. The whole creation thus merges within the body of the transcendental Narayan at the time of annihilation, and the creation emanates from his body again with the same unchanging categories of fate and individual nature. I'm going to read that again and ask you to explain it, okay? The whole creation thus merges within the body of the transcendental Narayan at the time of annihilation. And the creation emanates from his body again with the same unchanging categories of fate and individual nature. Explanation of that sentence, please. Very aptly said. You pick up where you left off. Would you say it in another way?
So it's gonna restart with the same circumstances.
Yes. What does that mean? expand on it a little more. You got the concept, but just what does it mean?
The same fate, the same rules are going to apply.
And the residual karma that we had at the time of annihilation of the universe, when we didn't make complete perfection and get out of the cycle of samsara, and still it was time for Mahavishnu or Lord Narayan to breathe in. We were annihilated, or apparently resting within the body of Lord Narayan. When he breathes out in a few seconds later, according to his time, but hundreds of eons of time, according to our calculation time, that karmic activity that we performed in the last creation carries over, and we start again. We pick up where we left off. Yes, Prabhu.
We were just reading this yesterday in the Bhagavatam that how that carries over is the subtle body is not annihilated. Subtle body is the false ego, the intelligence, the mind, and the three modes of material nature. So that's carrying basically like a container the karma and brings it back. Only the gross form is annihilated.
Yeah, totally. There is partial, there's many annihilations, yeah. Did you have something you'd like to add or ask? Please.
I was gonna ask, like, if it's like similar to the concept of like reincarnation. Is it similar?
That's what it is, yes.
Oh,
That's what it is. That's karma. That
Oh,
means
okay.
karma means Krishna defines karma. I think it's 8. I don't know which chapter. Anyway, in the Gita, when Arjuna asks, "What's this? What's that? What's this?" and he defines it in one word. Karma means activities that create a new body. Wow, is that succinct or what? You know, activities that we do that create a new body. That's karma, and so that's the concept of reincarnation. And then we think, well, why is this happening to me? I'm just 12 years old and my mother just died and the house just burned down and this and that. And God is unfair and he's really cruel. Well, it's happening because who knows when, maybe last life, maybe whatever, maybe last creation, we did some activities and maybe we burnt somebody's house. I'm just, maybe we burnt somebody's house down and killed somebody or whatever. And so now we have to suffer the reaction to that. But the time factor, because there's so much time that has escaped or passed on since doing the activity and getting the reaction. Unless you hear from a proper authority, you don't make the connection. I did this, therefore I'm getting that. And everything is the way it should be. And therefore, understanding those things. Look, it's already 8:30. We didn't even finish the purport. Okay, anyway, Haribol. And therefore, when we hear in the 10th canto, Tenu Kampam Sushamikshamanam, Lord Brahma's prayer in the 8th chapter of the 10th canto, whatever chapter it is. When good things happen, I offer my respects to the Lord. I realize I don't deserve it, but he's being so kind. He's giving me something nice. When bad things happen, I realize I don't deserve that either. I deserve worse because I've been around for so long and I have this huge storehouse of karmic activities coming up. And he's just giving me a little token, even though it was devastating, It's just a little. And if I go on offering my respects to the Supreme Lord in any circumstances, good or bad circumstances, then one becomes devoted, eligible to enter the kingdom of God. It becomes his rightful aim because he's seeing there's nothing beyond Krishna in everything. He's in control. It's mind-boggling and mind-expanding. Yes, Prabhu. Oh, we're almost finished the purport. Okay, great. Go ahead.
Wait, should I wait?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking that in video games, there's this thing called like a checkpoint. So like when you're doing like an adventure and to get to the end, once you reach a certain checkpoint, even if you die within that, you just start back at that place and you don't lose everything that you've advanced up to that point.
You see, so the concepts are there. They just don't know how to properly apply them. Thanks. Okay, there's just a couple more sentences and then breakfast. Haribol. Okay. The individual living entities being parts and parcels of the Lord are sometimes described as Atma, qualitatively one in spiritual constitution. But because such living entities are apt to be attracted to the material creation actively and subjectively, they are therefore different from the Lord. Okay, any takeaways? Questions? Okay, sure.
What does actively and subjectively mean?
Actively, okay, because the living entities are apt to be attracted to material creation actively. So it's not just a visual attraction. It's then we do activities. We have a desire and then we act on those desires. So we're actively, and then what's the result of being acting on our desires? We're subjected to the reactions of those activities. So actively pursuing things and then subjected to the reactions. That's my understanding. Yes, Prabhu.
Bhakti dissolves the subtle body. So if you want to get free from that cycle, chant Hare Krishna and serve the Lord, and gradually your subtle body will be completely dissolved.
Perfect ending. Thank you. Perfect information. Yes. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very kindly. However, I just thought of this. However, therefore, understanding all of these things, therefore, we have to have patience, perseverance, and determination in our practice, because we've been here for a long time, and it's not just, I've been chanting Hare Krishna for 2 years now. How come I'm not self-realized? Well, hang in there. Keep at it. Jai, Haribol, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.